Congressman Mike Pence describes himself as, quote, a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. Today, Congressman Pence gave a speech at the Detroit Economic Club laying out his plans to restore the economy, essentially saying government should get out of the way. Many believe he's getting ready to run for the White House in 2012, and in fact, at the Value Voters Summit earlier this year, he came in first place. In our Constitution Avenue segment tonight, Congressman Pence joins us from Birmingham, Michigan. Thank you, Congressman, for being with us, and thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you, Elliot.
You know, let's go back to 2008 when the economy was going off the cliff, over the cliff. My recollection is, and you've said this in many of your speeches, you opposed the government bailout for General Motors and Chrysler. You opposed all the money that went to Wall Street. You opposed all the government guarantees in the commercial and the financial markets. What would you have done to stabilize an economy that was lapsing into a depression at that moment?
Look, I think that there was a way that we could have approached the crisis in the financial institutions the way that we approached similar crises back in the 1980s, take these institutions on an individual basis, engage in an FDIC-style workout in each of those institutions. And frankly, with regard to General Motors, I know the administration's been very busy touting the positive news. We're all encouraged by the progress General Motors is making. But a lot of people, I think, around the country still believe, and that IPO gives evidence, is that it was the bankruptcy reorganization that GM went through that's made them a more attractive investment today, and not so much the taxpayer handout.
Congressman, without going back into the GM situation, I don't think there was any way the private financial markets could have done what government did then. There wasn't the capacity because they tried. Let me ask you a different question, though. Back in 1929...
I don't know if that's really true, Elliot. Well, I mean, the truth is that if a pre-packaged bankruptcy that would have been then made available to the very people that are participating in the IPO today may have had a similar result. And we wouldn't have the federal government, as we have right now, still owning 33% of General Motors even after the IPO.
I've read at least part of your speech. I'm not sure I got the entire transcript, but what I see in your speech is you want to eliminate what we call fiscal policy, which is government spending to increase demand. You want to eliminate the Fed's role. You have a bill to eliminate the Fed's focus on job creation. So what you would be left with as government levers is really nothing at all to promote job creation other than cutting taxes and limiting spending. Am I correct about that?
Well, I got to get you the long version of the speech.
All right, maybe I got the cliff notes, but
you might actually see a little more. No, that's all right. Look, yeah. But with regard to the Fed, sure, I think that the Fed's latest decision, the QE2 decision to put $600 billion in printed money in the marketplace is the wrong decision. I mean, the Fed can print money, but they can't print jobs. And an effort on their part to generate some inflation as a means of keeping long-term interest rates down, I think is bad policy. What we ought to be doing is focusing the Fed on price stability, which is their historic mission until Congress changed it in 1977. Get them back on price stability and then say to Congress, your job is to pursue policies, and this administration, your job is to pursue policies that get Americans back to work. And, you know, the onus ought to be on the elected officials and the policymakers to get the economy moving again.
Congressman, I think historically there's certainly some validity that Congress has always focused on the job creation through stimulus packages, and the Fed has focused on worries about inflation. But when the concern is deflation, as it has been, they need to stimulate demand, and what they're worried about is there not being enough demand in the economy. That's what this quantitative easing is designed to address. And so it really is the flip side of their addressing the inflation concern, and the Fed would say, hey, we got to do this, or else the economy is going to implode. And you, Congressman, are proposing that all the levers of government be taken away. Who would be there to create jobs?
Well, who would be there to create jobs if the Fed wasn't flooding the marketplace with printed money and the federal government wasn't spending money we borrow from China into the economy? Here's a crazy idea. How about the American people? How about we embrace the kind of tax reform that I talked about today here at the Detroit Economic Club? I think it's time not only to preserve all the current tax relief on the books, Elliot, which you know is my position, but I think it's time for some dramatic, bold tax reform in the form of the flat tax. I think a flat tax, which is now in place in 20 countries around the world, for crying out, Russia embraced a flat tax about 4 years ago. A flat tax is exactly the kind of pro-growth, policy that would be an enormous tax cut for working Americans, but it would be built on the principle that we want to encourage savings, we want to encourage investment, and that Americans should only have to pay taxes on their income once.
All right, Congressman, I know your time is short, and unfortunately we have to move on. So much more to talk about. I hope you'll come back, and I wish you well. And by the way, when are you going to announce for the presidency?
Good to be with you, Elliot.
Oh, come on, you got to answer that last question for us. All right, we'll record it.
I sit here in Detroit. You know, we've been encouraged and humbled by what we've heard from people around Indiana, around the country. We're going to take the next couple of months and prayerfully consider where we can best contribute. All
right, well, Congressman, thank you, and I look forward to having you back on the show with more time to pursue all these issues.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
It's 3 a.m.